Open the door of my pantry in February when the ground outside has been locked under snow for 2 months and there is not one green thing growing for 100 miles in any direction. And you will see shelves of food I grew last summer, jars of apple rings, dark and sweet and chewy as candy, bags of green beans, tomatoes gone deep red and leathery, sweet corn, peppers, herbs, whole meals waiting in glass, enough to carry my family clear through to the first planting in spring. And not one bit of it is frozen, not one bit of it is canned, not one jar of it has ever been near a refrigerator or a single wire from the power company. Every bit of it was dried by nothing but the sun and the moving air in a wooden box I built in one afternoon for about $10. My name is Elias Yoder. I am Amish. I farm here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and drying food in the sun is one of the oldest things my family does. Older than the canning jar, older than the ice box, older by far than the freezer in the basement that runs up your bill all year long and then loses everything the day the power goes out. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to build the simple thing that does it, what it costs, which foods it works on, and how to know when the food is dried, right? So it keeps for a year and does not spoil on you. And I am going to be honest with you the whole way through, the way I always am, because there is a great deal of foolishness told about this on the internet, and I would rather you trust me than be dazzled by me. There is one real safety matter you must understand, and I will not skip it. Stay with me. Let me start with the why, because once you understand the why, every other thing I tell you will make plain sense instead of being a set of rules to memorize. Food does not rot on its own. Food rots because tiny living things get into it and feed on it. Molds, yeasts, bacteria, the little creatures you cannot see that turn a good tomato to slime and a fine piece of fruit to fuzz. And here is the thing every one of those creatures must have to live and to multiply: water. They cannot grow in a dry place. They cannot do their spoiling work without moisture to live in. That is the whole secret. And it is the same secret behind the salt cure and the smokehouse I have shown you before. Take the water out of the food and the food cannot rot because the things that rot it have nothing left to live in. A fresh tomato is better than 9 parts water out of 10. A grape, an apple, a green bean, a pepper, all of them are mostly water held in the flesh. Pull that water out, dry the thing down until the moisture is nearly all gone, and what is left is the food itself, the sugar and the fiber and the goodness shrunk down, small and light and safe. The mold looks at it and finds nothing to drink. The bacteria starve, and the food sits on your shelf, sweet and sound, for months and often for a year or more. That is drying. It is the oldest preserving there is, older than any people now living, because long before there was salt to spare or a fire kept just for smoking, the sun was already drying fruit on the branch and meat on the rock. Men simply learned to help it along. This is not my people's invention, and I will not pretend it is. It belongs to the whole world and to nearly every old people in it. The grape growers of the old countries laid their fruit on mats in the sun to make raisins long before anyone thought to write it down. Whole nations dried fish and dried fruit and dried grain on their rooftops and in their courtyards because the sun was the only preserving they had, and it never once sent a bill. The American farm wife strung apples on thread and hung them in the rafters every autumn within living memory. The knowledge is old, and it is everywhere, and it lives by the same rule my grandfather lived by: waste nothing, not even the sun pouring down free on your roof. Now, the sun does this work for nothing. It pours down more heat in a single afternoon than you could buy in a month of electricity, and it asks nothing in return. The trouble has only ever been how to catch it, how to hold that heat around the food and keep the bugs and the rain and the dew off while the drying happens. And that is all a solar dryer is. It is a box that catches the sun's heat, holds it gently around your food, and lets the damp air carry the water up and away. No motor, no wire, no bill, just the sun and the moving air doing what they have always done, only faster and cleaner because you have caught them in a box. Let me show you the simplest version first, the one a child could make this afternoon, because you should start there. Take a shallow wooden frame. An old window screen is just about perfect. Or build a frame from scrap lath about the size of a serving tray. Across it, you stretch food safe mesh. And hear me on that word food safe because it matters. You want a fine plastic or stainless steel mesh made for food or for screening, not the cheap aluminum fly screen and not the green plastic netting that may have things in it you do not want in your food. A few dollars of proper screen at the hardware store, you lay your sliced food out on that mesh in a single layer, the pieces not touching, and you set the frame up off the ground in the full sun, tilted a little to the light, with a second screen or a clean cloth laid over the top to keep the flies and the dust off. Air moves through the mesh top and bottom, the sun warms the food, and the water lifts away. In good dry weather, thin slices will be done in a day or two. That is the whole of the simple one, and it costs you almost nothing. But I want to show you the better box, the one that earns the $10 because it does three things the open screen cannot. It gets hotter so it dries faster. It keeps the rain and the dew and the bugs off entirely. And it keeps the direct sun off the food itself, which matters more than folks think because hard, direct sun bleaches the color and bakes out some of the goodness, while gentle, warm air dries the food beautifully and keeps it bright. They call this an indirect dryer, and the idea behind it is older than the word. Here is how it works. And it is clever in the way the old things are clever, with no moving parts at all. You build two parts. The first is a collector, a long, shallow box, the lid of glass or clear plastic painted flat black on the inside. The sun comes through the glass, strikes the black, and the black turns that light into heat, the same way a black shirt cooks you on a summer day. Cool air comes in a row of holes at the low end of that collector, slides up across the hot black surface, and by the time it reaches the top, it is good and warm. The second part is the drying chamber, a taller box sitting at the high end of the collector with shelves of your food-safe mesh trays stacked inside it and a row of vent holes up at the very top. The warm air rises up out of the collector, passes up through your trays of food, drinks the water out of them as it goes, and slips out the vents at the top, pulling fresh air in behind it the whole while. Hot air rises. That is the only engine it needs. No fan, no power. The heat itself keeps the air moving on and on all day long as the sun shines. Now, let me give you the parts plainly because the $10 is real if you are a thrifty sort who saves wood and glass, and I will tell you honestly where it climbs higher if you must buy everything new. You need some boards or plywood for the two boxes, and most folks have scrap enough for this or can get offcuts for a song. You need a piece of glass or clear, rigid plastic for the collector lid, and an old storm window or a salvaged pane is perfect and often free for the hauling. You need a small tin of flat black paint. The high heat kind is best, but any flat black will do to start, a couple of dollars. You need your food safe mesh for the trays, a few dollars, and that is the biggest real cost. And you need a handful of screws or nails and a bit of screen over the air holes to keep the bugs out. Built from saved materials, it comes in around $10, honestly. Built from all new lumber and a new pane of glass, you might spend $30 or $40, and it is still the cheapest food dryer you will ever own, and the last one because there is nothing in it to break. A few words on building it right, because small things make the difference between a box that works and a box that disappoints. Paint the inside of the collector flat black, and only flat black, never glossy, because flat black drinks the light and glossy bounces it back out. Set the whole thing at an angle facing the midday sun, tilted so the glass takes the light square on, propped on blocks or built on legs. Make your air holes at the bottom of the collector and your vent holes at the top of the chamber, never the other way about, because the warm air must travel up and out, drawing the cool in below. Put fine screen over every hole going in and coming out, or you will drive flies along with your apples. And make the trays slide in and out easy because you will be loading them and turning them often. And let me tell you how to tend it through the day, because a dryer is not quite a set it and forget it thing, though it is close. In the morning, once the dew has burned off and the sun is up good, you load your trays and set the box facing the sun. Around the middle of the day, when the sun has swung round, you turn the whole box to follow it if you can, the way you would turn a chair to keep the warmth on your back. Once or twice, you pull the trays and turn the food and swap the trays top to bottom, because the lowest tray nearest the warm air dries fastest and the top one slowest, and swapping them evens it all out. And here is the one you must not forget. At sundown, you bring the food in, or you close the box up tight, because the night air is damp and the dew will settle right back into food you worked all day to dry, and you will have lost your gain out in the morning, in at night until it is done, a day or two of that in good weather, and you are finished. Now the food, which is the whole point, drying loves thin and even. The thinner you slice, the faster and the more evenly it dries, and even is as important as thin, because one thick slice in a tray of thin ones is the one that will mold and spoil the rest. So take your time and slice even, and do not crowd the trays. Give the pieces a little room so the air can pass between them. Apples cored and cut in rings or thin wedges, dry to a sweet chew that children fight over. Tomatoes, sliced thin or halved if they are the little ones, dry to something so rich and deep you will put it in everything you cook all winter. Grapes turn to raisins, plums to prunes, and pears and peaches and apricots all dry beautifully. Of the vegetables, green beans, peppers, sweet corn cut from the cob, carrots, peas, squash, and shelled beans all dry well and keep for months. Herbs dry in almost no time at all and hold their flavor far better than the dusty jars at the store. Some foods want a small help first. Apples and pears brown less if you dip the slices in water with a little lemon juice before they go in. Green beans and corn keep their color and dry safer if you blanch them a minute in boiling water first. But for most fruit, you simply slice it and lay it out. And do not be discouraged by how the food shrinks, because it shrinks a great deal, and that is the whole point of it. A heaped tray of apple slices dries down to a handful you could hold in 2 hands. 10 pounds of tomatoes becomes a pound you can tuck in a small jar. That shrinking is the water leaving, the very thing you wanted gone, and it means a summer's harvest that would never fit in any freezer will sit on a single shelf in jars, light and small and keeping. A bushel of apples, a row of tomatoes, the whole green bean patch, all of it put up small. That is how a family dries a year of food in a box the size of a chair. How do you know when it's done? This is where folks go wrong, and getting it right is the difference between food that keeps a year and food that molds in the jar in a month. So listen close. Fruit is done when it is leathery and pliable, like a good dried apricot from a fine shop. You fold a piece over and it does not snap, but you tear it open and there are no beads of moisture inside, none at all. And when you squeeze a handful and let go, the pieces spring apart and do not stick together in a wet clump. Vegetables go further, all the way to brittle and hard. They should snap when you bend them, because a vegetable left the least bit moist will spoil. When in doubt, dry it longer. You cannot easily over-dry food meant for the shelf, but under-drying is what ruins a whole batch. The piece that feels nearly done, but just a touch cool and damp in the middle, that is the one that will let the mold in. Now, here is the safety matter I promised you, and I will not skip it, because it is the one that truly matters. When your food comes off the trays, it is not all dried exactly the same. Some pieces are a touch drier, some a touch damper. So you do a thing the old folks called conditioning, and it is simple and it is important. You take your dried food and pack it loosely into clean glass jars, only about 2/3 full, lid them, and set them on a shelf out of the sun for a week or so. Each day you give the jars a good shake to move the pieces about. What this does is let the moisture even out among all the pieces, the damper ones giving to the drier ones until all of them are the same. And here is the watching part. If in that week you see any beads of moisture, any fog on the glass, any wet at all, your food was not dry enough. You take it straight back out and dry it more. If you see mold, even a single speck, you throw that whole jar out, all of it, without argument. Do not scrape the mold off and eat the rest. With dried food, mold means it was packed damp, and where you see one speck, there is more you cannot see. When it conditions a full week with no moisture and no mold, then you know it is dry clear through, and then it will keep. Once it is conditioned, you store it proper. Clean glass jars with tight lids are best, kept somewhere cool and dark and dry, a pantry, a cupboard, a cellar shelf. Light fades the color, and the goodness so dark is better than a sunny windowsill. Cool keeps it longer than warm. Label each jar with what it is and the date you put it up, because a year on, you will be glad you did. Stored that way, most dried fruit keeps a year easily, often longer, and dried vegetables much the same. When you want to use them, some you eat just as they are, like the apple rings and the tomatoes and the herbs. Others, the beans and the corn and the harder vegetables, you simply soak in water or drop into a soup or a stew, and they drink the water back up and come near to fresh again, ready to feed you a hot meal in the dead of winter from food the summer sun put up for free. Now I owe you the honest limits, because I will not have you build this and then feel I cheated you. The first honest word is about weather, and it is the big one. The sun does this work, so where the sun is strong and the air is dry, this works wonderfully and fast. Out west, in the dry country, in a good hot spell anywhere, you will dry a load in a day or two and wonder why you ever did anything else. But where I live, in the damp east, and worse down in the humid south, the air is already half full of water on a muggy day, and damp air cannot drink much more out of your food. So the drying goes slower, and on a wet, gray, humid stretch, it may not get your food dry enough on its own at all. On those days, you finish it off in a warm oven on its lowest setting with the door cracked, or in a warm spot by the wood stove, just to drive out that last bit of moisture the muggy air would not take. Know your climate, and do not try to dry food in the open through a rainy week, because food that dries too slow can spoil before it ever gets dry. The honest rule is this: dry weather, the sun does it all. Damp weather, the sun does most of it, and your stove finishes the job. The second honest word is about what to dry and what not to. Fruits, vegetables, and herbs are the safe and easy beginning, and that is where I want you to start. Meat is a different and more serious matter. Drying meat into jerky can be done, and I have spoken of it before, but raw meat must first be brought to a proper hot temperature to be made safe, and a simple sunbox does not reliably do that, so do not dry raw meat in this and call it safe. Start with the fruit and the vegetables, learn the craft, and leave the meat for the proper cured and heated methods, and keep the whole thing clean, the trays, your hands, the jars, because you're not cooking this food, you're only drying it, and clean is what keeps it good. Honest is better than impressive every single time. Now I want to take a moment, because this is the part that matters, and it is bigger than a wooden box. Walk into the kitchen store and look at what they sell you to do this very thing. There is the little electric dehydrator on the shelf, $50, $100, $200, a plastic thing with a fan and a heating coil that runs on your power all day and quits in a few years when the motor burns out. There is the freeze dryer now, the big machine they advertise, $2,000 and $3,000, and it does a fine job. I will not say it does not, but it runs your meter hard and ties you to it. And there is the grocery store itself, where a small bag of dried apples or a handful of sun-dried tomatoes costs more by weight than near anything else in the shop. Every one of those is a fine enough thing, but every one of them is a thing somebody sells you. And the thing that actually does the work in all of them, the taking of water out of food by gentle heat and moving air, is a thing the sun has done for free since the beginning of the world. And here is the quiet truth of why you have not heard of the wooden box. It is not that some villain hid it from you. It is simpler and almost worse than that. There is no money in the sun. Nobody can sell you a monthly bill for sunshine. Nobody can put a brand on the breeze. A man who builds one wooden box and dries his own year of food owes nobody anything and buys nobody's machine ever again. So no company advertises it, no store puts it up front at eye level, and a whole people slowly forgot that the brightest, biggest, most powerful thing in the sky will dry their food for nothing if they only catch it. The knowledge was not destroyed. It was just outshone by things with plugs on them and brand names painted on the side. My people never forgot because we never gave ourselves over to the plug in the first place. My grandmother dried apples on screens in the loft of the wash house every September of her life, and her mother before her, and the jars on my shelf this February are the same jars in spirit, full of summer, kept by the sun, costing nothing but the work of an honest afternoon. A family that can dry its own food is a family that does not lose its winter store the day the power fails and is not at the mercy of the price of a bag at the store. That is not about being cheap. That is about being free. So here is what I want you to do. This week, before the good drying weather is gone, build the simple one first. A frame, a piece of food-safe screen, a clean cloth over the top, set out in the full sun, slice a few apples thin and even, lay them out, and watch what the sun gives you back by evening. Once you have eaten a piece of fruit you dried with your own hands and nothing else, the rest will not seem strange to you. Then, when you are ready, build the box with the black collector and the chimney of warm air, and put up a real share of your harvest, jar by jar for the winter. Start small, slice even, dry it past where you think is enough, condition it a week in the jar, and watch for the moisture. Do that, and you will have a shelf of food that the sun preserved for free, that no machine can match for taste, and that will be there waiting for you when the snow comes. Tell me in the comments below, what is the first thing you would dry? The apples, the tomatoes, the herbs, the green beans? And if you grew up with someone who dried food the old way, a grandmother with apples in the loft, tell us what you remember, because those memories are the very knowledge I'm trying to keep alive on this channel. I read every single one. And next time, since we have filled the pantry with dried food, I'm going to show you the old way my family stores a whole winter's harvest in a cellar dug into the ground that stays cool without 1 watt of power. The shelves, the sand, the placement that keeps cabbages and carrots and apples sound for months. It is the natural next step after today. Until then, catch the sun, slice it thin, waste nothing, and remember the people who built this country with their hands, new things we are only just starting to remember.